I find myself using a lot of feedback and delay when I create music, and I don't think that enough producers are taking full advantage of the true power of looping, time-based effects. I want this video to be a collage of all sorts of very small tweaks you can make to your sounds that add a tremendous amount of character to them. This is going to be less organized than my previous two videos, since I really want to pack a lot of details into this video's length, so please bear with me as I go through this short loop, pun intended, created specifically to demonstrate just how many creative uses there are for these kinds of effects. A lot of these examples rely on Ableton's stock effects, so I apologize to users of other DAWs if you don't have access to a stock effect that can do exactly what I'm doing. Just remember that effects are effects, and if you can get access to any set of tools that have these features, you should be able to recreate these sounds. Focus on the why, and these tricks should stick with you no matter which DAW you work in. Let's begin with this basic saw melody. Just a saw and a filter. Instead of a typical delay, I'm going to use this granular delay to give it space, with a combination of sampling large grains at a low rate, high feedback, unsynced delay times, and an additional random per grain delay. The reflections we get out of this effect occur at very sporadic intervals, creating a bed of sound that really accentuate the plucky, transient quality of our source. I can increase the spray amount to create even less correlation between the delay intervals, turning the sound into almost a wash. Add a bit of random pitch variation, and the grains will gently chorus against each other, adding an even richer, more analog feel. Here's a bell sample playing chords. The sampler instrument is set to loop mode, and I've made this loop quite short, so each voice will repeat at least once or twice before the length of each note ends. An interesting side effect of this is, since each voice plays back the sample at a different relative speed, they also loop at different times, creating this nice parallax arpeggiated effect. I can increase the variety of this effect by assigning some modulation source to change the loop length per voice in addition. In this case, I'm using the velocity of each note to modulate the loop length. Higher velocity, shorter loop. In Ableton, I can also set each note to trigger randomly from a set range of velocities, so this loop will stay dynamic and evolve over time. And this plays quite nicely with the previous granular delay as well. Alternatively, you could use an arpeggiator in combination with some long release times to turn this loop into a melody generator with some nice rhythmic qualities. Or unsync the arpeggiator and randomly modulate it to create stuttering textures. Feel free to take advantage of randomness and just start recording for minutes on end while melodies are created for you. Walk away for a short break to rest your ears while your workstation does the heavy lifting. You can always go back and skim through what you've recorded for the best ideas or inspiration. Working with something and not satisfied with its tonality? Use extremely short delay times and high feedback to create your own comb filters and add that extra bit of metal that you're looking for. Or use a creative EQ like UVI's shade to take advantage of combs and the qualities they can impart into your sounds. You can even try modulating the delay time or comb frequency to create crazy time-based effects. Better yet, take advantage of granular processing and use randomness like the spray function to create resonances that are dynamic. The key here is high feedback and short delay times, while the extra random delay will control the range of pitches your comb can take. Here's a warm melodic loop. It's got nice color and lots of noisy texture, so it makes for a great atmospheric background element. I like to warp and skew the layers tucked behind my lead instruments to bring a little bit of extra focus to them in the gaps between verses and during transitions. One fun way to do this is by turning a delay into a tape stop effect. Set your dry wet control to 100% wet, ensure that your delay is repitching the source, start at the lowest delay time, and then increase it. The speed at which you do so will determine the way the effect sounds. This works for any effect that has a time buffer and can do repitching, though each effect likely has its own character. Another way to use this effect is to create pitch warble. Use automation or a modulation tool to constantly change the delay time, and with the right settings, you can get some classic lo-fi vibes. Add some gentle cutoffs for a more vintage sound, and if you're using an effect modeled after a classic space echo, there is likely a way to overdrive the tape circuit for warm, crunchy distortion. Need other ways to add interest to your sounds? Try Slapback. It's tried and true, a proven way to add a bit of dimension to your elements. Here's a totally dry slap bass. I'll use a panable delay to add a fast, single reflection to the left channel. Immediately, the sound is given character and depth. You can also use a slapback to create a pseudo-stereo image for your sounds, with even shorter delay time and a ping-pong delay. Adding just a bit of slapback to the low mids is a subtle way to create the Haas effect without completely shifting the dry signal. Do be careful, and pay attention to a vector scope whenever you use the Haas effect, since things can easily get out of hand. But otherwise, a great way to increase your stereo image. You can also achieve slapback using reverb reflections. Just use pre-delay and extremely short decay times to simulate a loud, hard reflection off of a wall. You can also experiment with the room shape, which controls the decay curve of early reflections, and remove the late reflections entirely if you prefer a drier sound. We're almost through all the elements in this short piece. I want to draw attention to other sources of feedback in any of the tools you might have at your disposal. Experiment heavily with settings you might not think to push to their limits, and you could end up with sounds you've never heard before. Check out these examples of feedback in the reworked shifter device.
Deep inside your love, deep inside your love, deep inside your
And the hybrid reverb device.
deep inside your love, deep inside your love, deep inside your love, deep inside.
Neither of these you'd expect to have a feedback circuit, which is why it's so important to explore and learn of as many ways to break the intended use of your effects as possible. Most of these techniques I discovered through exploration, and all of them I think are extremely useful. There's one last trick for using feedback that I'd like to share, and that's creating an actual feedback loop inside your DAW. This is my all-time favorite sound design trick, 100% honest. Just be prepared for things to get very loud very quickly if you do this yourself. Please be careful and protect your ears. Make sure to use a limiter to prevent damage to your ears or your monitoring equipment. Here's an auxiliary return channel. I can route the audio of any track to this channel in addition to its normal destination using these send volume controls. In Ableton, sends are disabled by default on return tracks that would route into themselves to prevent feedback, but we can manually override this by right-clicking the return's own send control and selecting Enable Send. Then, by routing into itself at max volume, we have essentially created a feedback loop. Please make sure to put a limiter on this channel to guarantee that you don't end up with exponentially cascading loudness. I also suggest that you put a DC offset blocker before the limiter to get rid of any infrasound artifacts that will probably take over your signal chain if introduced. Now, we can unmute the return, send any amount of audio into it, and start recording what comes out. Not very useful, is it? The fun part comes when we start adding effects to this feedback loop. Here, I'm using convolution loaded with a pad sample to diffuse the sound into something harmonically rich and consonant. It's getting there, but resonant frequencies quickly take over the signal and smother all the interesting information, just like when a microphone feeds back into a speaker system. You can combat this manually using an EQ, but a much easier and simple solution is to use an automatic resonance suppression plugin like Soothe 2 here. I'm pushing it to its absolute limits to try and allow for every frequency to come through the signal chain as much as possible. And suddenly, without any frequencies to dominate the feedback, we end up with something quite interesting. I'm going to lean into this warbling, watery sound by adding a chorus to introduce combing and phasiness in hopes of making the sound really start to shimmer. Hopefully this demonstrates just what kind of amazing sounds you can create by letting physics and entropy take control of the complicated parts of sound design. Nudge your tools in the right direction, and if you give them the space to create sound for you, you'll be surprised by the results.
Deep inside your love, 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 deep inside your love.
I hope you've enjoyed this issue of 10-Minute Techniques. If you want more, subscribe and comment. Here's a link to the playlist. Links to where you can find me are in the description. Thank you, and stay technical.